Welcome for another episode of Blow the Whistle. I'm your host, Ashmack, and this is for you, all of my music lovers, all of my band lovers, specifically HBCU bands. This is where we get down to the nitty gritty, okay? We talk all things band, all things music, all things auxiliary, and we're gonna figure out who will be crowned Band of the Year. So you know what? Today we're talking about rankings, but more specifically, what is really happening? What's going on when we're trying to figure out who will be crowned Band of the Year? Because these rankings, the math ain't mathin' when it comes to these rankings. Let's get to our Blow the Whistle crew. Jay, what are your thoughts about this?
I'm doing great. I'm just going with you. The math ain't mathin'. That's gonna be the whole name for the show.
Yeah, I think that's just gonna be the whole name for the show. The math ain't mathin'. Quan, that's talking about percussion. What are your thoughts about this?
I'm trying to figure out the math. This is like trigonometry. I'm writing stuff. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Okay, it sounds like nobody gets what's happening at the moment. But you know what? Maybe Portia, maybe you can weigh in and make things, make a little bit of sense. Maybe. Okay, what's happening with the auxiliary?
I just want to know who in the room because it's not quite aligning in my head how you're comparing these squads when some have one squad, some have two, some have four, some do everything. So I just want to know what they're looking for. We need to walk through this, I think, from our perspective.
What are they looking for? Maybe, our perspective will help make it make sense. But I don't know. I feel like with math, 1 + 1 = 2. But that's not what we're getting. T, can you weigh in on the dance lines and our dancers? What's up?
I think that the rankings are really interesting, and I am looking forward to the conversation.
I mean, I don't know where we begin, where we end with this conversation, because the way I'm looking at these rankings as of right now, I'm just confused when it comes to the bands that are still here, the ones that were never included from the beginning, but somehow are being ranked. What are they ranking them on? I don't know where to begin. So you know what? I think we should just start. How about that? Jay, let's take things over to our wins and brass.
First of all, I don't understand, where was Kentucky and Morehouse in the ranking at all? How do you get added and you weren't even in the original count? Like that, you know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of when you pledging and then you just randomly add 2 people on. And the rest of the line is sitting there like, who are these dudes? Now, you got to make them work with this. No. None of this makes any sense.
I got a story about that, but I can't say that on here, but that just moved down.
Look, we talked about Fort Valley 2 episodes ago. And Fort Valley, to me, as a smaller group, is doing some really good things. Personally, in my personal opinion, looking at whatever's left on this list, and I need to just go back and look at the list again, because the truth of the matter is you have Winston-Salem, who just jumped to first, right? But Fort Valley needs to be on this list. Where did Benedict come from where Fort Valley is off the list and Benedict is still on the list? In my personal opinion, I think Fort Valley still needs to be on this list. But to be very honest, I really don't understand how you lose 7 and add 2.
I think my question, how does that compute to the end of this thing? Wouldn't you have to have been consistently, there's no consistency. To me, you earn your way on in the beginning and you kind of navigate with those that are there. I don't know how you add somebody halfway through something and then come to an end result that is going to be acceptable to the masses.
But here's another thing real quick, I got to bring this up. Morehouse over Fort Valley? The math ain't mathin'.
Jay, I think it's important we look at this, right? For Division II and NAIA, I'm looking at the musicality rankings, right? Morehouse is at number 10. You got Fayetteville State at 9, Benedict at 8, 7 is Virginia State, 6 is Tuskegee, 5 is Langston, Miles is 4, Central State is 3, Winston-Salem is number 2. this is what's concerning. No shade to them, but I've never seen them ranked like this or ranked so high when it comes to musicality. What are the thoughts about that? And is this being ranked correctly? More importantly, what is this being ranked upon?
The math ain't mathing.
Quan, what are your thoughts?
But it goes back to the point. Like for this, like Winston-Salem is number 1, when Florida Memorial was just number 2, the previous ranking. So you're saying that they stayed the same, but yet and still for the list that they have in Division 2, Winston-Salem is only number 1 in picture drill and design rankings, which that's questionable in itself.
It's questionable because Winston-Salem came from 10 to 1.
That's what I'm saying. Hey, I blame this on AI. I'm gonna just go with that. We're gonna blame it on AI. That's what we're gonna do. Blame it on AI.
Now, Quan, based off these rankings, right? Picture and drill design rankings. Winston-Salem is number 1, but they come in number 2 for musicality rankings. But percussion-wise, where are they at? They're number 5. Now, here's my question. If these bands are being ranked, or Winston-Salem specifically is number 1 musically, wouldn't they be number 1 across the board? I mean, I don't know if AI could really help with that, but if someone is ranked at number 1, shouldn't they be ranked at number 1 for every category? Like, well, what's happening here?
So I'll say this. So and I'll just be frank. I'm not discrediting Winston-Salem, and I know everybody wants to be number 1, but nobody. And I'm gonna say this: nobody. If Florida Memorial had the numbers as other schools had, they would be the top 3 bands in the Division 1, hands down. That's picture drill, auxiliaries, musicality, so forth and so on. And speaking about musicality, there's some big bands that are not outplaying them. So that's number 1. I don't understand how I believe Langston was like number 1 2 shows ago, and they're now number 6. Like I don't get it. Like I don't understand if it's a week by week case, if it's who they played against, kind of like the college football series. Like I don't understand it. And we all agree. I agree that Kentucky State should be on this list, but they should have been on the list in the first week, not now. Not now. And where does Morehouse come from? Who do they play? Who have they played?
Okay, let's talk about auxiliary. We're still on Division 2, NAIA. You have Clark Atlanta at number 4, Albany State number 3. You have Morehouse at number 2, and number 1 is Florida Memorial. Portia, what are your thoughts on Morehouse? Have you ever seen their band program at all?
I've never seen them in my whole life, and I've been watching bands. I've never seen them, and that's no disrespect. I just have never seen them, so I have no idea what these rankings are based off of. And did you say that Virginia State Auxiliary was like 9? I think that's a tad bit crazy, but I would have to look at the rest of these bands. But I just don't know. I think my major question is, with the different types of auxiliaries, why is this combined? And if it is combined, what's the criteria for judging them? What are you looking for? Like, how are you comparing apples to apples when some people have apples and some people have oranges and some people have pears? It's not, I don't know how you're doing this. So I hope at the end of this year, of this season, that they will start releasing some of the criteria, maybe asking band programs for feedback, because I can't understand how this is all going.
Portia, since you're talking about criteria, I'm wondering how this is also being ranked specifically for a program like Morehouse, right? Because isn't their band program with Spelman as well? So when you have joint programs like that, right? Does that make a difference in the program, or how is it weighed or ranked for the overall program, or is the auxiliary just like its separate identity or entity? Like, what is the ranking here?
Maybe auxiliaries are ranked lower than other parts of a marching band.
Okay, Jay, let's head over to you discussing brass and winds. What are your thoughts?
this is the funny thing to me with that question, right? If I think about, I have to base it in this process, right? If I think about a beauty pageant, no one loses in every category of the beauty pageant, but wins everything overall. I've never seen that. I've never seen that happen. You lose every category, but you win overall. So going back to your question, Winston-Salem is number one. In my personal opinion, if you're number 8 in auxiliary, you lost. If you ain't first, you last, right? But but you're not even in the category as it relates to drum majors. So how do you get to number one? I guess you're number 2 in musicality, but you're number 5 in percussion, and you number 1 in picture drum. Wow. Over Florida Memorial? Okay. The math ain't mathin'.
Hey, you ain't got to tell me twice. The math ain't mathin'. Maybe the math makes sense to you, though. If you're joining us at home, please make sure to include us in your conversation and your rankings and your math. Maybe your math makes sense and it's just us, okay? Hit us up. Use the hashtag BTW Crew, BTW Halftime as well.
Yeah, I think ultimately, and this is coming from somebody who has, some time in DCI, I think that the truth of the matter is that we need a recap. So if you don't know what a recap is basically where they put the judges' scores out there and you can be able to see the numbers and how they tally for every caption. And so because of the fact that we can't see this, we just see you putting out a bunch of numbers, it almost looks disingenuous. Like someone just woke up one day and was like, I like these guys, I don't like these guys, or hey, let's just pick some names out of a hat and then we're just going to throw them in there. Let's plug them in there. And the ones that I like, we'll just keep at top 3.
And I think from an auxiliary perspective, it's easier to make one thing killer. I think it's a different thing to ensure that all of your auxiliaries are often operating at a high level. So I just have questions about this. And who's judging? Do they have someone who specializes in all of this, who has background in all of this? Or is there one person who has a particular background that is weighing in on all of it? Or is there a committee? Like who's voting? And I don't mean any harm if it is just band directors voting on auxiliary.
I mean, Portia, you are raising some valid points when it comes to who's voting, how people are voting. I'm just confused. Quan, let's head over to these percussion rankings because at this point, I don't even know how we got here. Okay, I can start from the bottom up, from 10 to the number 1 ranking, but does it even make sense? Central State's at number 1. You got Langston at number 2. I've never heard or paid attention to their drum line. Number 3, Elizabeth City State. Who's looking for them? No shade. Virginia State. How is Virginia State ranked number 4 and you don't even mention Norfolk State? No bias. That's just what it is. Then you have number 5 at Winston-Salem State. Like, I just don't understand what these rankings are on. And I'm just really confused on how we got to Central State being number 1. What are your thoughts?
You got Central State at 1 when, like I stated last show, they're in a rebuilding process. They really don't have an identity as of yet. And the reality of it, we compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And so we compare styles to styles as well. As of right now, what style would you compare Central State with to whom? We can't.
How can you be number 1 when you're just trying to figure out and rebuild your foundation?
Correct. So then if you compared Langston to Central, Langston would win that battle. If you compared Elizabeth City, no disrespect to them, but they're rebuilding as well, Langston would win. If you compare Virginia State to Langston, that would be a decent battle. But I do believe that Langston would win. If you compare Winston-Salem to Langston, I believe still Langston would win. Now, here's where it gets fishy. Even though they have a small percussive section, what Florida Memorial is playing, going back to musicality, can outplay a lot of people. So I would put them technically over Langston style wise. When it comes to Kentucky State, they don't have a poor drum section either. But I would not put Central State over them, Fort Valley State, Tuskegee, nor Albany State. I mean, I don't get how Alabama Elizabeth City just jumped up in the rankings when we haven't really seen them. And then the question would be, who did they play to make you say they're on a come up? I'm just saying. So I don't agree with none of that. I don't agree with none of that. If I had a list, honestly, percussive wise, I would put Florida Memorial 1, and then I would put Langston 2, and then I would have some time filling in the rest.
All right, we got to get to another ranking. This one specifically is about drum majors. Now, drum majors are a big deal. We see them as being the leaders of each band program. It's the ones that people look forward to seeing. They're the first person that you see. You know what I mean? The person that represents the band and its whole entity. But how actual and factual is that when it comes to this ranking that we have here? Number 1 is Virginia State. Number 2, you got Elizabeth City State. Number 3, Savannah State. That's just the top 3. I mean, I could go from the top down, but I feel like at the end of the day, if I were to do that, it just continues to prove that the math ain't mathin'. Jay, what are your thoughts about this?
So, as a person who watches a lot of drum majors, I'm going to be very honest with you all. Half of these people I ain't even seen. I haven't seen Morehouse. I haven't seen Bowie. Central State looks okay. They look all right. Tuskegee looks cool. I ain't seen Benedict in God knows how long. I ain't seen Benedict since I was an undergrad. So Savannah is okay. Yeah, I don't know if I agree with this either. Because again, I haven't seen most of these people.
Okay, that's a valid point. Because we live in such digital times, I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that have we seen these bands or the drum majors specifically? And have we seen them recently? Because when I think about it, I'm thinking about to my undergrad days, and I'm just not seeing a lot of these bands. Number 1, I'm not seeing Virginia State. Quan, what are your thoughts? Have you seen them?
I'll say this real quick. As I go back and I'm just looking overall, because our biggest, I guess you would say, hub for videos we would consider this YouTube, right? So if you click on YouTube and you type, I'm using Virginia State as an example. I don't think Virginia State has a bad program at all, and we need to support our HBCUs. But if you look from a media perspective, they don't have a lot of up-to-date videos. So because of that, in regards of the masses, how can you truly say that they're number 1 if you're looking at their media intake and the process of how people see them? It's not a lot. The first video that comes up, of course, is Killa Kev. Big shout out, right? Big plug. The next video that you see is a video from the Independence High School marching band, the Virginia State Championship Finals video. That's it. They don't even have homecoming videos up there yet. They have Delaware State from a month ago. So we have to first, again, kudos to their program and the directors for what they're doing. But you have to acknowledge, how are you being seen to be this high in the ranking?
Now, there might be a question about up-to-date videos concerning drum majors, but there's definitely no question about it when it comes to media being up to date with dance lines. T, what are you seeing right now? Who's on your radar?
I'm going to say that I don't agree, because Hampton, Ebony Fire, I've loved them since high school. They are so clean. They have their own sense of style, from the stands to the field. And I just don't see how, some of the people on the list are on the list and they're not. I think they are a little slept on, to be honest. And then also UAPB. The Golden Girls are really clean, and the Golden Girls, they come with it. So I don't think that was fair, at least not for those 2 schools. I think Grambling is still doing Grambling. So
T, these are all valid facts when it comes to Hampton, when it comes to Ebony Fire, when it comes to the Dancing Dolls, when it comes to a lot of these dance lines, right? But again, It goes back to what Portia stated. What are we ranking auxiliary on? Are we ranking auxiliary solely on auxiliary as a whole? Are we dividing it to flag lines, to majorettes, to dance lines? What are we really basing auxiliary, like what is the foundation? I think that needs to be clear because right now it's just kind of like, okay, we're just gonna pick this one, we're gonna pick over here. But I think it's important that we try to find out or figure out or talk to somebody that's a part of the judging team or, you know, a part of these programs that we know for a fact has a hand in what this ranking and the criteria for that looks like. Because it's confusing.
I have a question for you, T. I got a question for you, sis. Are those bands that were removed, are they clean?
Are we talking about?
Like I'm not picking on nobody, and I understand. I know your expertise. You dig in the land of dance, but maybe because we don't know what's the rubric, maybe some of those schools or auxiliaries was taken off because maybe the schools ain't pushing what that is.
I don't disagree.
All right, we got to wrap this up for Division 2. Let us know your thoughts. Use the hashtag BTWCrew. And while you do that, let's discuss Division 1. Jay, what are your thoughts on the ranking and who was removed?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm going to just go ahead and say it. Honestly, I mean, when we're talking about Division 1, we're looking at everybody that we have in Division 1. I honestly agree with it. You know, and this is no necessarily slight to any other program or any other programs that were taken off, but I absolutely agree with it. When you're looking at the top 10, they probably are not the stronger bands out of the top 10. So, yeah, I definitely would go with that. I don't see why that it would be, you know, too far off.
I mean, I think it's clear. What is this episode called? The Math Ain't Mathin' portion. Let me just look at this real quick when it comes to Division 1 for the auxiliary rankings. Jackson's number 1, Norfolk State's number 2, number 3 is A&T, 4, Texas Southern, 5, Florida A&M, 6, Tennessee State, 7, Prairie View, 8, Southern, Bethune-Cookman at number 9, and number 10 is Alabama State. Let's talk about the numbers and what they have on their papers. And what does yours look like for your personal ranking?
Some of these numbers from that first poll to now are absolutely bonkers. I do not know how in the world. The only thing that has been consistent on here is that Jackson State is number 1. I'll just say they're number 1. That's what's on the paper. But Southern at 8, the Dolls are not 8. But I don't even know how you're counting this. I don't know. Bethune went from 2 to 9. I understand that. Grambling is gone. Hampton is gone. A&T went from 5 to 3. Norfolk went from 7 to 2. Texas Southern went from 9 to 4. And then PV went from 10 to 7. Tennessee State wasn't on here before, but they number 6. Above Alabama State, Southern, Bethune-Cookman, and PV. I just have questions about this. There is no way that you're telling me, and T can speak to this more, that the Dolls is number 8 in anything.
Never.
I don't even, excuse me, FAM is on here now at number 5.
What's their dance team called, y'all?
Cricket.
What I thought. Okay.
They ain't got one.
They call crickets.
Nah, that was like the Diamondbacks or something like that.
No, you talking about the girls that was dancing in the stands?
Yeah.
Yeah. They were trying to be a part of it. That was a couple of years ago, though, wasn't it?
No, for real. But they walked in the stadium this year.
Oh, they did? They came back?
Yeah.
Nah, they never left. They just not a part of the band. They go to the other side.
Oh.
Are they counting them?
Yeah,
it's a separate outside school entity that is not associated with the band.
The UCLA. What's the girls that?
Right.
Them.
So
USC, yes.
Or USC, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I just have and I mean, T, I jump in here. I just don't think, and I don't see where these numbers align. Y'all can call me biased if you want to, but we've been doing some stuff at Norfolk this year, and they had tried to play with us at first. But yeah, this is interesting.
If for nobody else, Southern and Alabama, I just don't think that's accurate or fair at all. Because them girls are slaying.
I haven't seen anything that justifies this. And I would love to have a conversation about it. I would love to see what those score sheets look like.
Based on what we know of prominent band directors on these committees and all, when it comes to the rankings from week to week and these lists, do you think that has an effect on how we see these rankings and overall the mindsets and possibly, an age gap, generational gap of what these individuals have been in and been through and leading all this time compared to what the world is like in 2023?
And I mean, depending on where
even from the
you're from, some people think color guard is unnecessary. So that's a very good question. I don't know.
Even from the point of view of like drum majors, 20 years ago, the drum major had to conduct the band. 20 years later, the drum majors are just dancing at particular schools. Now, not all schools. I'm sorry for my bad. Not in the Legion, y'all. Not in the Legion.
Not us.
Not in the Legion. Hit high on the holler, but not in the Legion. What I'm saying is, but 20 years ago, drum majors were actually conducting. 20 years later, they USDA, dancing. But I'm just saying, like we got to be honest though. So when you ranking a drum major, are you ranking it on conducting? Are you ranking it on leadership? Are you ranking it on the presence in front of the band? Are even you ranking it on whistle command? We can even go that far. But to some of these rankings they got for drum majors, come on now. Come on.
All right, we got to talk about the rankings for Division I drum majors. I'm actually a little bit confused, or a whole lot of confused. The math is not mathing when it comes to who's in this number one spot. Texas Southern. Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen their drum majors a day in my life. So how are they at number one? Number two, you got Prairie View. Number three, Alabama State. Number four, A&T. Number five, Jackson State. And honestly, if you are a band head, you have to have some type of appreciation for Jackson State, for J5. You know what I mean? Like, for me personally, when you think about drum majors, you think about them. They have to be one of your top, drum majors in the ranking. And I'm really surprised they're not higher up. At least not like top two, they ain't number two. I don't know. That's just me, okay? But what are your thoughts about Southern? Southern actually comes in spot number 6. Do we agree with that?
Here's the thing. If it's Texas Southern, my point that I'm trying to make is, look, if you took 5 people off the list, right? Those 5 people that you took off the list should not be on any other list. If you took them off the 5 top ranking out of everything, those 5 people shouldn't be on the list. How is Hampton number 9? Please answer that. Right? So that's the first thing. Now, second thing is, I'm not about to sit here and be massively biased, right? But I have to say this. I don't understand where Jackson State falls at 5.
No.
I don't think there's anybody who would disagree with me. And here's the other problem that I have with that. I also don't believe that Bethune should be number 7.
I don't either.
So my question is, again, what are we basing this off of? Because I honestly would not even have Alcorn still on this list, because I would definitely put FAM somewhere in this list of top 10.
Yeah.
Because if the truth of the matter is, if you really want to get super honest, many of these drum majors on here were based off of FAM.
I also have another question, probably 2, because what are we ranking drum majors off of? Are we just ranking them off of dancing? Are we actually ranking them off of being leaders of the band? Because we do have band programs that actually conduct. We talked about that before, but I digress. Do we agree? Number 6, Southern is in that spot. Yay or nay? What are your thoughts?
Hell no.
No.
Hell no.
You're not telling me. And I'm going to say this. And if you new here, the Kangs, that whole culture is not my thing. That's a little bit crazy. I think that's nuts. I think them people have cult following and it's out of control. They probably need a therapy group. But what I'm gonna say is there is no way that Southern is number 7. They are one of the top 3 bands in this country. Let's be
every year
100% clear. Like that cult
One of the most
following,
consistent bands in HBCU.
consistently, like not even wavering. I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna call a spade a spade. So them being 7 is crazy. Now I really want to see these score sheets. These numbers are not making sense. I do not understand. You're not gonna tell me what's Bethune's number now?
5.
Nope. They y'all can say what y'all want to, and I think Jay said this on the last show. They sound good. Well, however they landed there, they sound good. Like, so what are y'all using? I don't know. It's a little bit too much for me. Like Southern, and I'm not the biggest fan of all things Southern, but them being number 7, I think is outlandish in every way possible.
So, in my opinion, Alabama State. So it's hard for me because Alabama State, I feel like, is a top 7 band. I don't believe that they should be number 10. And that's going off of their sound and then selection of songs in the stands. And looking at their drills and whatnot, their drills been on point. But I don't believe that North Carolina A&T is number 1. I don't believe that. Honestly, you could kind of shift between Norfolk 1, Jackson State 1. Like, you can flip those. And I'm going to be fair. From the drilling of Texas Southern that has been lately under Brian Simmons, I could see them. I could leave them as top 4, being honest.
But therein lies the problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm not mistaken, this is the overall ranking.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a picture and or drill design area for that, which Texas Southern is number 8.
You're right. And Florida A&M is 7.
But are we saying, like, when we look at this in musicality, we're saying that A&T is the most musical band on this entire list?
A&T is the most overall band on this entire list.
Because musicality, they have them at 1, and then percussion, they have at 1. Now, in regards to percussion, you could flip them 1, 2, or 3, either or. That makes sense. Musicality, they're top 6. Well, I would put them 8. Compared to Jackson State, Norfolk Southern, Bethune-Cookman, Tennessee State, Florida A&M, they're 8. Being honest.
Here's what we need to also factor in, right? It doesn't mean that A&T is the best band in the land, right? But what they do have that a lot of other band programs do not have is a budget. You see them around so many times, if it's online, if it's in person, traveling. They have notoriety that a lot of our band programs in general just do not have the funds to be at or to be seen at. So shout out to their marketing and promotion. And I think that plays a huge factor into why a lot of people believe they need to have these top rankings. Me personally, I don't think so. But you know what? Sometimes it's one of those things of you're just seen everywhere and people think that you at the top. So hey, shout out to marketing.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And that goes back to my argument about the pageantry, right? Or being the at the pageant. If you in the top in all the other places, then at that point, it only makes sense for you to be in the top in the overall. But I also don't agree as far as musicality is concerned when it comes to A&T. So for me, I don't know if that necessarily puts them or should put them in a lower ranking. but I totally don't agree with them from a musicality standpoint, and I also don't agree with them from a drum major standpoint. To me, as far as drum majors are concerned, I think they need to be probably in 5, maybe 6 or 7 range, based on who's on this list. And again, Hampton should not be on there at all.
The math ain't mathin'. It just makes no sense. We're seeing Delaware State at number 9 on this percussion ranking, but we don't see their band anywhere else. How did they even get the opportunity to be here? Or why weren't they included in the beginning? So I'm just confused on how the ranking, how bands were added, removed, how they're in places that they shouldn't be. I don't know. The math ain't mathin'. I'm just gonna chalk it up to that.
At the very least, when this season is over, there has to be more transparency. You're not going to please everybody. We completely understand that. But this should make sense. At least I think at the beginning of this, they should have said, these are the things that we're looking for. There are differences across the programs. This is how we're going to account for that. This is how we're going to have that judge. This is how you'll be evaluated. And to me, it's so much gray with so much money on the line. And this is your first stab at this. I think it should have been way more clear, transparent, upfront information provided, because we should not be scratching our heads this late in the game.
Yeah, I mean, Del State being number 9 at this percussion ranking just doesn't make sense for me. When and where was the last time we actually saw their band program or their drum line? And at this point, I'm just really confused on how they made this list. We're not seeing them in any other ranking. Overall confusion when it comes to schools that were included in the beginning of this ranking. Then they were removed. Now we're seeing other schools that are completely added out of the thin air. I'm just confused. I think I'm just going to go back to saying the math ain't mathing. The math continues not to math. I don't even know how or where to make sense of any of this. And I just don't see how they're on this list or what's being factored in as to why they're being ranked, period. That's it.
We never seen Delaware State in none of this list. Delaware State is nowhere on any other list.
They haven't been on a list at all.
And you know what? That's just the episode of Blow the Whistle today. Simply because what has been consistent is the math is not mathing from start to finish. But hey, you know what? Maybe you have something else that makes sense. And maybe your math is. Maybe there's something we left out or didn't factor in, and we want you to continue the conversation with us. Make sure to use the hashtag BTWCrew as well as BTW Halftime. And you know, like I know, that halftime is game time. I'm your host, Ash Mack. Make sure to hit me up at Ash Mack Gets It. And we will see you next time for Blow the Whistle.